Hey there, horror fans, and welcome to the Eric Fright Show, your go-to haunt for all things spooky. I'm your horror host, Eric, and each episode, we dive deep into the heart of horror, from real-life nightmares to the silver screen's most terrifying moments. So, grab your popcorn, dim those lights, and let's plunge into another chilling fright fest together. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Eric Fright Show, but not just any episode. Today's episode is airing on Friday the 13th. I'm so excited, and I couldn't wait. I'm so glad that the schedule of my show had an episode fall on this year's Friday the 13th. It was the universe aligning for me, so I had to grab this opportunity to do this episode for this movie. There are so many entries in the Friday the 13th franchise, but there's one that I hold near and dear to my heart, and that is Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. That is what this episode is going to be discussing and dissecting and talking about, because there's so much to get into. But before we get into the film, you already know, we're going to start off with our first segment, which is Fright Files. So I thought, what do I want to talk about for Fright Files for this episode? Do I want to talk about mental health? Do I want to talk about telekinesis? And then I was like, you know what? You're digging so damn deep into this when really you just need to talk about some real life camping horror stories. So I do what I do, and I end up on Reddit, and I found a real life camping horror story from this user, Scott. All right, I'm going to try and read it. Ready? Scott is my name, duh, from 2 years ago. And I want to just put it out there that my husband made a point to tell me that not everything on Reddit is a true story, but I don't care. We don't know if this is true or not. This person wrote it as a true story, so we're going to read it as a true story, and we're going to keep our horror hearts alive, right? But anyway, here we go. This is Scott's horror story from camping. This is really creepy, so here we go. I was camping in Northeast Ohio by myself. I was on a third and final night there. I woke up. This is a little graphic. I woke up to piss, walked about 10 feet from my hammock, and noticed a headlamp about 80 to 100 feet from me. I watched it for about 10 minutes. I watched him stand up, sit down. I got my boots on and grabbed my hatchet and started walking to the right of my campsite. I was going to find out what he was up to. I got about 50 yards from my site and started walking towards him when I noticed another headlamp about 40 feet from me and walking around. I hit the ground and threw some leaves over me. He walked about 10 feet from where I was laying. Then he stopped, lit a cigarette, and finished his beer. He threw his candle on the ground when finished. After he got far enough that he couldn't hear me, I got up and started walking towards the first guy. I got close enough to him that I can hear his phone receiving messages. I moved up closer to him quietly to where I can see his face lit up from his cell phone. That's when he stood up and started walking towards my hammock. I laid there on the ground for a minute and made my way towards my site. I stopped when I started hearing my tarp that I had above my hammock being trashed. Then I can see flashlights, and then my big flashlight turned on and off. I heard my mess kit being thrown and them talking about how he was just here. I laid on the ground and watched my flashlight walk away until it was a small, dim light. When the sun came up and I returned, my whole site was destroyed. My hammock and tarp were shredded by what looked like a machete. My mess kit was stomped on. They took my backpack, rain gear, and flashlight. I went to the spot where I seen the first guy and found shoe pouches, 8 empty beer cans, and an empty lighter. I walked to where I seen the other guy and found an empty bag of powder, which turned up to be meth, a mess of cigarette butts, and a pile of shit with no toilet paper to be found. Let me tell you, I was so into this, like, it was scaring me. And then turns out just some meth addicts trashing the place, robbing them, and then took a shit. But like, first of all, one, why you, I'm mad that the fucking story ended with a, and the last thing that we're going to get is a pile of shit with no toilet paper to be found. Did that need to be a part of your story? I thought it was a fun camping story though, because like, you know, when you, not fun, but like, it's creepy. Like, putting yourself in that situation, I would have been terrified. Two guys trashing around and they had a machete apparently. Maybe he was just using that for Jason, but I loved it anyway. Scary. You're by yourself in the woods. Like, meth heads, crazy as hell. You know what I mean? That's scary. This is one of the reasons I don't like that shit. The next story I'm going to share with you has a name, and it's from ranker.com, and it's, the user says is deleted, so I don't have that, but the name of this story is Weird Camper Named Hatchet. So here we go. While backpacking the Appalachian Trail in northern Pennsylvania, a friend and I just finished hiking up a very large hill and were ready for lunch. We had planned on eating at a shelter that was another 2 miles down and up another hill. After some discussion, we decided to eat at the shelter as there would be water. Well, as we arrive at the shelter, we come across who we initially think is another hiker. But no, this guy was just carrying an old school backpack and was digging for crumbs out of the bottom of a Fritos bag, so he seemed a little out of place. We asked if he was backpacking or day hiking. Never making eye contact, he mutters out, backpacking. We then asked if he was section hiking or through hiking, as in doing the entire trail. He looks at us with this weird look and says, I'm just hiking through. After a little bit of talking and avoiding all of our questions, he just quickly said, I gotta go. As he packs his bag, we asked what his trail name was so we could look out for him on logbooks. He clearly had no idea what we were talking about, and this struck us as odd because anyone who hikes the Appalachian Trail knows what a trail name is, and usually has one they go by. After sort of explaining what he meant, he said, "Oh, right, it's Hatchet," which was obviously a load of crap because the guy was holding a pack axe in his hand when he said this. So while we continued hiking and we reached our camping spot, we got settled for the night when I'm woken by Hatchet rustling through my backpack. Now, my friend and I both use hammocks, and I had my backpack wrapped around the tree my hammock was hanging on, so he ended up shaking my entire hammock. I screamed, "Hey," and he looked in my hammock, stared right at me for a good second, then bolted. By the time I got out of the hammock, he was nowhere to be seen. Turned out he had stolen a pack of tuna from my bag and a couple granola bars from my buddies. Never saw him again. So the weird part was when we got back into town and ate lunch at a diner, turns out old Hatchet was on the run. There was a wanted poster hanging up on the door. Turns out 2 weeks prior he had mugged a couple people, leaving one guy pretty bloody. The whole thing was pretty freaky. We gave our statement to the police but never heard if they called him or not. You guys got lucky, I'll tell you that. First of all, this is the shit I'm talking about. They literally might not. They can't be horror fans because you see this weird guy walking the trail, and you said he had an axe or something in his hand, eating crumbs at the bottom of a Fritos bag, and his head is down because he clearly doesn't want to interact with nobody. And y'all asking him 10,000 fucking questions. 10,000 questions. What's your name? What are you doing? Blah blah blah. Like clearly, like y'all need to learn how to read people. Okay, there's some people that want to talk because you'll know. You say hi, they're like, hey, you know, you can have that connection. You know how to start a conversation. Somebody walking past you with an axe and their head down, and you say something and they're muttering and they don't really want to interact with you. Take a motherfucking hint. Don't talk to them. Period. You know what I mean? Also, got lucky that he ran away because he could have easily done what he did to the other people to you. But you know what I'm saying? Like, don't bother people. Like he's trying to mind his business, and y'all about to fuck around and find out. But I thought those two stories were fun way to start off this episode on Happy Friday the 13th. So if you are campers, and it is September, and I think people camp around this time of year, I'm not really sure. Just be mindful of your surroundings because not just animals out there. So let me talk a little bit about it, about myself now, because I just love to do that. That's why I have a podcast. But believe it or not, I've actually never been camping. So my family just never were camping type of people. Like, I don't know anyone in my family that's been camping, but again, it was me, my sisters, and my parents. I didn't really talk to a lot of the extended people. But my best friends growing up did go camping. So I was always kind of intrigued by it because they would tell me stories. But I also was watching Jason when I was way too freaking young, so I already was like afraid to go camping because of freaking Jason. But then you got to add in like real terrors of like creatures and bears and animals. No fucking thanks. I don't want to be in a tent and have something crawling on me or in me or any of that. Like, no. I don't want to spend any of that time. But I am mildly interested. Let me like preface with that. Mildly interested in maybe spending a night or two in like a cabin though. Sounds like the right amount of camping that I would like to do. So maybe I'll do that. Maybe I will. I don't know. But even though I have never gone camping, what we did do every summer was go to a lake that was about 45 minutes from where the town I lived in. And we called this lake Iced Tea Lake because the water was cedar water. It looked like iced tea and it would like stain your like light colored clothes. Like if you wore like a white t-shirt in the lake, it would turn the iced tea color and you ain't never getting it out again. That was always a fun time. My friends and I would always walk the trails of the woods, and although nothing scary ever happened to us, we were only there ever during the day, never at night. We would always like pretend Jason was out there or like in the woods, in the lake. And when you're a kid swimming in a lake and you've watched horror movies about a man living in a lake or dead and buried in a lake and you can't see anything below you, your imagination gets the better of you. So we used to really scare the crap out of ourselves. But now as we got older, we used the weekend trip, like the day trip to the lake to do other stuff. So like when we were teenagers, and I'm telling you, we were bad. We were like 13, 14. We started smoking cigarettes and we would steal cigarettes from parents and sisters and stuff like that. So we would go off on those trails again, but this time we were to be smoking like 1 or 2 cigarettes just so like my dad and like their grandmother who was ever there didn't catch us. But like I'm sure we had to have smelled like it, right? Like my dad didn't smoke, their grandmother did, but like I'm sure he had to have smelled it. But yeah, we would sneak off to go smoke a couple cigarettes, and I'm telling you, like it was me and 2 other people, and we would just like light a cigarette and just suck them down. We were like had no business smoking. We had no business doing any of that. We were definitely the type of teenagers that Jason would have targeted if he were out in those trails. And to be like, let me just also say, I live in New Jersey, and Jason's from New Jersey, so the idea of him being in the woods was even more real to me because it was New Jersey. So the first film was actually filmed somewhere in New Jersey. I don't remember the Blairstown, I think it is, something like that, at a real summer camp, Camp Nobi Bosco, if I'm saying that correctly, who really were into the touristy part of people wanting to come there because it's a real summer camp, right? They really weren't into like people trying to be there. I apologize if you hear my dog shaking and sneezing as she's coming over to me as I try to record. She just wants to be featured on the podcast. I'm going to let her stay in. Anyway, but recently they have embraced the touristy part of all this. And now they do like, they have props. I think props are like, they have stuff going on there, and they do tours of where different parts of the camp that it was used for filming. And they even have packages where you can like stay overnight and watch a screening of the movie out on like outside and sleep in one of the cabins. It's like really cool, but it is like really pricey and the quantity of the tickets are limited. But it's definitely on my bucket list to do, but I don't know when I don't get enough marketing to see when to check for when they're on sale or when they start to go, because even when I recently was looking it up, I read all the packages, but I couldn't find like how to get a ticket. And apparently they don't do it like as often. So like they're not really, from what I'm getting, very organized with it. But if you are interested, all you got to do is a quick Google search for Camp Nobi Bosco, and from there you should be pretty good to figure out the rest. That concludes segment 1. Let's move into the next segment, segment 2, Featured Fright. Attention horror fans, I am thrilled to announce my collaboration with the legendary Fangoria. Whether you're a die-hard horror fanatic or you just love a good scare, Fangoria's got you covered with the best in horror news, features, and collectibles. And guess what? As a special treat for my listeners, you can now get 20% off your entire order at Fangoria.com. Just use promo code The Eric Fright Show at checkout. Don't miss out on this killer deal. Stock up on all things horror and join the frightful fun. Stay spooky, my friends. Now, back to the show. So, again, we are discussing the Friday the 13th Part 7, the New Blood movie for this week's episode's Featured Fright. The plot, according to IMDb, is this. Jason Voorhees is accidentally freed from his watery prison by a telekinetic teenager. Now, only she can stop him. I fucking love that. Can you imagine if you've never, this is the first time you're ever hearing about this movie. You go to IMDb, you read the plot, and it says that Jason is accidentally freed from his watery prison by a telekinetic teenager. You are either in it or not. I don't think there's a lot of people that are either, I don't think there's any fucking wiggle room for that. You're just a very specific audience that this movie targeted, and that's it. I'm part of it. I'm happy to be on the right side of this, and that's correct. I'm letting you all know that there is a right and wrong side, and people that are against this movie are fucking wrong. The rating, and that's where we come into the ratings. That's why I wanted to preface that, because the IMDb rating is a 5.2 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes audience score 37%. Fuck out of here. Lies and deceit, and they're out here gaslighting you, thinking that Part 7 isn't the best Friday movie ever made, and they're lying to you. And I want to be here. It is my duty to let you know that is incorrect. And I just want to put it out there too, because y'all can't see me. Don't take me too damn seriously. I'm just having a fun time. I want y'all to have a fun time. So don't get all serious and start blasting me on social or whatever the case may be, that I get mad over this or get mad over that. I just want to segue real quick that I made a comment a few weeks back on TikTok. I made a video about the Jason coming out to the Multiverses game, and it was a picture of him, and I was like, we waited fucking years for new Jason stuff, and the first thing we get is Fisher Price Jason, and people were fucking pissed off that I was they're like, why are you so mad? Then just don't play the game, and blah 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 blah. And then somebody tried to bring race into it. I'm like, fucking dude, you have no idea about anything about me. Half my family is literally biracial, and I grew up in the hood with all of my friends being African American and white and Hispanic. I have this literal no racism in my body, but you don't know me, and I'm not going to tell you that because I don't give a fuck what you think about me. But the point is, I love Jason Voorhees. I love that he's in Multiverses. I just was saying that we could have got something different first, as the first announcement, than him being a featured character in another game. Instead of his own game, his own show, his own movie, whatever the case is. That was my gripe, I guess, if you want to say. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to play Multiverses. I thought it was funny because he did look funny to me. I just thought it was a fun thing to do. And people get so mad at you for just making these jokes on the internet. But that's, I guess, part of the package of being this kind of content creator kind of person. But I wanted to share that because it's a Friday the 13th episode, and it's Friday the 13th, and I wanted to state that I just am here to have a good time and have fun and talk fucking horror with everyone. So let's continue on with our segment. Let's talk about the characters from Friday the 13th Part 7. First up, we have Tina, who's played by Lar Park Lincoln. She can be described as a troubled young woman with telekinetic powers. Her abilities are both a gift and a curse, stemming from a traumatic childhood incident where she accidentally caused her father's death. Now, as she grows up, her powers become more pronounced, but also more uncontrollable, leading to her being placed in a mental institution. Next up, we have Nick, played by Kevin Spiritas. He is kind-hearted and genuine kind of guy who spends a lot of time who is spending time at Crystal Lake with friends because they're there to do a surprise party for his cousins. Then we have Mrs. Shepard, who is played by Susan Blue. She is the devoted mother of Tina, who has endured significant hardship and loss, right? But her primary focus is on her daughter Tina's well-being, especially given the traumatic events of her husband's death and Tina's subsequent struggles with her telekinetic powers. Then we have Dr. Cruz, played by Terry Kaiser, not sure how to say it. He is a manipulative and unethical psychiatrist who is supposed to be helping Tina manage her telekinetic abilities, but instead of genuinely aiding her recovery, he's exploiting her powers for his own research and professional gain. Then we have Melissa, who's played by Susan Jennifer Sullivan. She is the quintessential mean girl of this movie. She's manipulative, vain, and always looking out for her own interest. And lastly, the man himself, Jason Voorhees, Jason Voorhees, portrayed in this one, first time for Kane Hodder. In this one, he's more formidable and relentless, even more than before. And his appearance, my God, I'm going to just give up today, is the same trademark hockey mask with weathered clothing, but this time his demeanor is particularly ruthless and focused, right? He's just different than he was in the others. So those are our characters that I painfully got through, so I appreciate it if you guys haven't hit stop on this show at this point by thinking that I just am unable to speak and that I might be stroking out. If you are concerned, just see if there's another episode after this. If not, then I have stroked out and I've left. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Moving on to the themes we can find in Friday the 13th, Part 7. So there are several themes that are common to the horror genre and this movie. So here are some of those prominent themes. 1, survival and perseverance. So obviously the theme of survival is central, right? Characters face the relentless pursuit of Jason Voorhees and must navigate fear and danger to overcome the odds stacked against them. Then we have the theme of guilt and redemption. So Tina's character wrestles with guilt over her father's death and struggles to come to terms with her telekinetic powers. So her journey towards acceptance and harnessing her abilities mirrors a quest for redemption. Then we have a theme of power and abuse. So Dr. Cruz's exploitation of Tina's powers for personal gain raises questions about ethics and the misuse of authority. So this theme underscores the dangers of manipulation and the consequences of unethical behavior. I'm going to pause there because I think it was important to take a breather on this, to expand a little bit on that. First of all, the consequences of unethical behavior. This is a fantastical consequence for Dr. Cruz. It's not something that we typically would say needs to happen to the people with unethical behavior. But he definitely, the misuse of authority is more common than we realize. But I just wanted to stop and talk about consequences of the behavior. He didn't face actual consequences that people would face in that situation. Another theme is isolation and vulnerability. So the setting of Crystal Lake and the surrounding areas emphasize isolation and the character's vulnerability, right? They're cut off from help and must rely on themselves to survive Jason's attacks. I don't really know how far they are from anyone else. It's never really known the miles, I think, but it's always very secluded in every Friday the 13th, right? Another theme is the fear of unknown. It's so common to think you don't even think about it, but the fear of the unknown is heightened by the supernatural elements introduced through Tina's abilities. This theme explores how characters confront and respond to forces beyond their understanding. So Tina has no idea why. We don't ever learn that why Tina is telekinetic. She just is. It's just like telekinesis is a part of the world, and we just so happen to have a girl from Crystal Lake that's got it, right? And it's not like she fully understands it either. She spent her not adulthood, but her childhood growing into a teenager and not learning how to hone that. And then it's not until this movie that she really is faced with learning how to really hone in those skills, right? And then our final theme is the final girl trope, right? It plays with the final girl trope where a female protagonist emerges as the primary survivor and often confronts the antagonist in a final showdown. This trope reflects resilience and resourcefulness in the face of overwhelming odds. We can't have any slasher movie anymore without the final girl trope. We love a final girl. We love a new final girl. We love a returning final girl. We just love it. And to the point where we're like, we want our final girls to survive. Like, Sydney Prescott can never be killed off, or there will be fucking riots in the fucking streets, because it's a different time. But like Friday the 13th never brings back their final girls aside from Alice. Alice was the only one that returned and was taken out. Everyone else we haven't seen again. And that's a little sad to me. But that is some themes that we have, but that really contribute to the suspense and psychological, like, horror aspects of Friday the 13th Part 7. So it's making it more than just a slasher film when you dig deep into the narrative that explores like complex human emotions and motivations amidst the horror and survival. Like when Dr. Cruz takes Tina's mother and blocks himself, he's really showing his most like desperate need to survive and his selfishness and how he really has only ever been out for himself. It is like known that he's only out for himself with what he's doing to Tina, but when he like literally puts that woman in front of him, knowing that she's a mother, knowing that his patient already like lost her father horrifically, in that moment he still let it happen. And I think that that's just so terrible. I hate that, man, and I don't use that word lightly. Like, what a character, right? But Friday the 13th Part 7 has always been one of my favorites. Again, this is why it has its own episode. I love the movies, but New Blood is just one I keep going back to over and over again. I connected with Tina. As I've mentioned in other episodes, I've always gravitated towards these strong female characters, and Tina having powers to fight back against Jason was a win-win for me. But also, Jason in this sequel is the scariest to me. It's the first time that we see Kane Hodder step into that role, and he really stepped up the fear factor for Jason to me. I love the mask and the clothing. The overall look was terrifying. I thought a lot of the supporting cast was really pretty fun too. And as much as I hated the character of Melissa, I enjoy that she's in the film. Like, this movie wouldn't be the same without that character. Aside from Jason, though, you can say that Melissa and Dr. Cruz are probably secondary villains. So when they both meet their demise, we really welcome it. And now I want to tell you my favorite kill from this movie. My personal favorite kill from this movie is Melissa. She was such a bitch, and when she tried to storm off, only to come face to face with Jason, and then he drives that freaking axe into her head and just tosses her aside like a doll, I thought that was fucking... I was like, somebody finally shut her the fuck up. But it was just like, she just wasn't grasping anything. And then she was like just terrible the whole movie. And so like, I don't remember, and I've been watching them recently, a role of a mean person in the other ones, like that mean, that we were like, some people might say Friday the 13th characters are disposable, and they were, but there was a lot of people that have like a little bit more depth right into them in this one. She's one of them, and she's one that we actually start rooting for Jason by the 7th one, just to get her. We don't want him to get everybody, but we definitely want her done. And they lingered her on for a long time, just like they lingered Dr. Cruz. But I can't do a New Blood episode without honoring the infamous sleeping bag kill. This is the first. We took 7 movies to get Jason to kill someone in the sleeping bag. This is where he like slams her into the tree. Fucking iconic. That is where I'm gonna leave the end of segment 2, and we're going to just dive into the next segment, which is Frightful Facts. Here are 10 facts from Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, and where those facts came from. First fact is development troubles. The film faced significant challenges during development, including script rewrites and budget cuts, which impacted the storyline and production schedule. That's from IMDb Trivia. Fact number 2 is the crossover concept. So initially, the film was conceptualized as a crossover between Jason Voorhees and another horror icon, Carrie White, from Stephen King's Carrie. But this idea evolved into the character of Tina Shepard, who has telekinetic powers similar to Carrie. That's from Sci-Fi Wire. Third fact is Telekinesis versus Jason. Tina Shepard's telekinetic abilities were a unique addition to the series, setting Part 7 apart from previous films. This plot twist introduced a supernatural element to the storyline. That's from Screen Rant. And I do want to add a little bit to that fact. I want to tweak that fact just a little bit because I don't think it's where the supernatural element to the storyline came, because Jason himself is supernatural, but I would say that it expanded the world more. It's not just one thing that's supernatural in that world with just a bunch of regular people. We see protagonists becoming powerful people and having abilities as well. I would say that is more of a fact. Fact 4 are stunt performers. So due to the demanding physicality of Jason's character, there were multiple stunt performers who were used during filming to portray different aspects of Jason's menacing presence, including underwater sequences and stunts involving fire. That's from IMDb Trivia as well. Fact number 5 is that there's a new director. Friday the 13th Part 7 marked the directorial debut of John Carl Buechler. He's known for his special effects work in horror films. His background and effects contributed to the film's visual style and portrayal of Jason's decayed appearance, from Sci-Fi Wire. Fact 6 is censorship issues. The film faced censorship challenges, particularly in the UK, where significant cuts were made to the scenes of violence and gore to secure a lower rating for theatrical release. That's from BBFC. Fact number 7 is the box office success. So despite mixed critical reception, Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, was a commercial success, earning over $19 million at the box office against a modest budget. That fact's from Box Office Mojo. Fact 8 is the influence on future films. So the film's portrayal of Jason as a formidable and seemingly supernatural force influenced later installments of the franchise, emphasizing his role as an iconic antagonist. That's from Screen Rant. Fact 9, special effects. I don't know why I giggled. Just do that sometimes. Special effects. Part 7 showcased practical effects and makeup to enhance Jason's appearance, including prosthetics and makeup to create his decayed and disfigured look. From Sci-Fi Wire. And our last fact. Our last frightful fact is cultural impact. The film's introduction of Tina Shepard and her telekinetic abilities added a unique twist to the Friday the 13th franchise, expanding its narrative possibilities beyond traditional slasher tropes. And that's from Screen Rant. And that is the end of our Frightful Facts segment. And that means we're moving on to our final segment, Fright Picks. All right, guys, for this episode's Fright Picks, I really tried to think of films that I would consider close and similar to a Friday the 13th movie. So Fright Pick number 1 we have is Sleepaway Camp. The plot for that are: bunks and showers are a mad stabber's beat at a summer camp strictly for teens. That's streaming on Tubi. I know a lot of people have heard of Sleepaway Camp, but I've heard of it for years and never actually seen it. So I definitely think if you've never seen it, it's a fun watch. I would say it's not exactly like Jason, but it's fun. Our second Fright Pick is Hatchet. Their plot is: When a group of tourists in a New Orleans haunted swamp tour find themselves stranded in the wilderness, their evening of fun and spooks turns into a horrific nightmare. That is also streaming on Tubi. I've never seen Hatchet, so this is a challenge for me and you. Number 3, The Town That Dreaded Sundown from 2014. That plot is 65 years after a masked serial killer terrorized the small town of Texarkana? I don't know. The so-called Moonlight Murders begin again. Is it a copycat or something even more sinister? A lonely high school girl may be the key to catching him. That's also on Tubi. I did watch A Town That Dreaded Sundown. I've only seen it once. I liked it. Don't have a lot of memory besides liking it, though, so I should revisit that too. 4th fright pick is In a Violent Nature. That plot is when a locket is removed from a collapsed fire tower in the woods that entombs the rotting corpse of Johnny. A vengeful spirit spurred on by a horrific 60-year-old crime is resurrected. His body is resurrected and becomes hellbent retrieving it. What the hell is that plot? Okay, anyway, that's on Prime. I've never seen it in a violent nature, but apparently it's the point of view of the killer. I'm sorry for the long pause there. I was all out of the place. I've never seen it, but I've heard good things. Last fright pick, though, is Thanksgiving. Thought it was fun. It's like another fun slasher that's ripping off Halloween, like Friday the 13th. And don't get mad when I say ripping off. You know what? It's using the holiday or date to make a slasher movie. The plot for Thanksgiving is, after a Black Friday riot ends in tragedy, a mysterious Thanksgiving-inspired killer terrorizes Plymouth, Massachusetts, the birthplace of the infamous holiday. And that's on Netflix. And I love that movie. The fucking Black Friday riot scene is, wow, so crazy to me and so realistic, and shit like that really happened. But check out those fright picks. I'm going to check out some of them as well. And that concludes this episode. Everybody, stay safe, stay spooky, and keep it frightening. That's a wrap on this episode of The Eric Fright Show. Thanks for tuning in and letting me share my love of horror with you. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to rate and review it on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps me reach more horror fans like you. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And until next time, stay spooky and keep it frightening.